Matt Parker was an ordinary man living in an unassuming town in the Midwest. At 35, he had carved out a comfortable life as a hardworking mechanic, a husband to Sarah, and a father to their 10-year-old daughter, Claire. To most of the world, Matt seemed content. But beneath the surface, he carried a quiet skepticism about faith, a skepticism rooted in years of doubt and disillusionment. Raised in a deeply religious household, Matt had spent much of his youth hearing sermons about obedience, judgment, and the church's authority. As he grew older, those teachings began to feel more like chains than a source of comfort. While Sarah faithfully attended church every Sunday, Matt often found himself sitting silently in the pews, questioning every word spoken from the pulpit. He would force a polite smile, nodding along to conversations about faith, but he couldn't help but feel that something was missing. Matt wasn't opposed to the idea of God. If anything, he longed to believe. But the image of Jesus presented by his church felt distant and hollow, as though it belonged more to tradition than to truth. As much as he tried to push the doubts aside, they weighed on him heavily, leaving a void he couldn't ignore. What Matt didn't know was that his quiet dissatisfaction was about to collide with something extraordinary, a near-death experience that would turn his world upside down. He would come face to face with a truth so profound, it would challenge everything he thought he knew about faith, religion, and Jesus Christ himself. If this story resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your perspective. My name is Matt Parker, and for most of my life, I thought I had faith all figured out. Or rather, I thought I didn't need to figure it out. I grew up around church folk, surrounded by Bible verses and Sunday morning rituals. But to me, it always felt more like a chore than a calling. If you asked me back then, I would have told you that faith was just a way to keep people in line. Respectable, maybe. Genuine? Not so much. But everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon, right there in the shop where I'd spent years working under the hood of cars. It was supposed to be a routine day, oil changes, brake checks, the usual grind. I had a car up on the lift, a rusty old truck that probably should have been retired 20 years ago. I remember thinking I should have double-checked the jack, but I was in a hurry, and well, you can guess what happened next. The jack failed. The truck came crashing down before I even had time to move. The weight slammed into me, pinning my chest to the concrete. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Panic took over as I realized I was about to die. My vision blurred, and the sounds of the shop, the clatter of tools, the hum of the air compressor, all faded away. And then, everything went still. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the shop anymore. I was in a place I can only describe as vast. It wasn't darkness, but it wasn't light either, not at first. It felt like being suspended in a sea of calm, as if time itself had paused. I felt weightless, yet completely present. Then, in the distance, I saw it, a light, so bright and warm that it seemed to reach into every corner of my being. As the light grew closer, I felt something I'd never felt before, a love so powerful and overwhelming that it brought me to my knees, or at least it would have if I still had a body. The love wasn't just around me, it was in me, like it had been there all along, waiting for me to notice. That's when I saw him, Jesus. He wasn't like the paintings I'd seen in church, no flowing hair, no solemn expression. He was real, alive, and so full of light that it was almost hard to look at him. But when he spoke, it was like his voice was coming from inside me, as if every word carried the weight of truth itself. "Matt," he said, and the way he said my name made me feel like I'd been known and loved forever. "The church teaches you lies about me." I didn't understand. Lies? How could that be? I wanted to ask him what he meant, but it was like he already knew my questions. "They've built walls between me and my people," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "But I am not behind walls. I am here, closer than you think." I wanted to stay there forever, in that light with him. But before I could say anything, I felt myself being pulled back. The warmth faded and the light began to dim. I tried to hold on, to stay, but it was no use. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the shop. The truck had been lifted off me, and my coworker Tom was shouting my name, his face pale with panic. The pain hit me all at once, a crushing weight on my chest like fire in my lungs. But even as the ambulance arrived and they loaded me onto the stretcher, all I could think about was him, Jesus, and the words he said, "The church teaches you lies about me." I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure: my life would never be the same. When I woke up in the hospital, I thought it might have all been a dream. The fluorescent lights above me, the beeping of machines, the sterile smell, it all felt so far removed from what I'd just experienced. But the memory of that place, of him, stayed with me like it had been etched into my soul. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Lucky didn't feel like the right word. They told me I'd suffered a collapsed lung, a few cracked ribs, and a concussion, but somehow I'd avoided anything worse. Tom, my coworker, had acted fast enough to get the truck off me, and the paramedics arrived just in time. Everyone was calling it a miracle, but it wasn't the miracle they thought it was. As soon as Sarah walked into the room, I could tell she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she gripped mine. "You scared me to death, Matt," she said, trying to smile through the tears. "I thought I was going to lose you." I wanted to tell her what had happened, about the light and Jesus and the words he'd spoken to me. But where would I even start? Instead, I squeezed her hand and said the only thing I could manage: "I'm still here." The days that followed were a blur of painkillers, physical therapy, and concerned visitors. Pastor Daniel came by with a Bible and a prayer, reassuring me that God had a purpose for sparing my life. I nodded along, grateful for his concern, but every word he said felt off, like it was missing the point. It wasn't until Sarah and Claire had gone home for the night that I finally had a moment to myself. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a close call. It was something more, something bigger. I had seen Jesus, felt him, heard him, and he had spoken words that didn't line up with what I'd been taught my entire life. The church teaches you lies about me. What did that even mean? Was he saying everything I'd learned was wrong, or just parts of it? The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I wanted to believe it was real, but doubt started creeping in. Maybe it was the pain meds. Maybe it was my brain playing tricks on me in the middle of trauma. I didn't say anything to Sarah at first. She was already so worried about me, and I didn't want to add to her stress. But a few days later, when we were sitting together in the quiet of the hospital room, I finally blurted it out. "I saw him, Sarah." She looked up from her phone, her brow furrowing. "Saw who?" "Jesus." My voice cracked as I said it, the weight of the words catching me off guard. "When the truck fell on me, I went somewhere, and he was there. He spoke to me." For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, the kind of smile you give a child telling a tall tale. "Matt, you were barely alive. You probably—" "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't my brain shutting down. It was real. He told me the church teaches lies about him." Her smile faded, replaced by something like fear. "What are you saying? That Pastor Daniel is lying? That everything we've believed is wrong?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But I know what I saw. I know what I heard." The conversation ended there. Sarah didn't want to talk about it anymore, and honestly, neither did I. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every sermon I'd ever heard, every Bible verse I'd ever been told to memorize, every hymn I'd ever sung, it all started to feel like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The next time Pastor Daniel visited, I tried to bring it up. I told him about the light, about Jesus, about the words he spoke to me. At first, he listened quietly, nodding in that patient way of his. But when I got to the part about the church teaching lies, his expression changed. "Matt," he said, leaning forward, "you need to be careful. Near-death experiences can be deceiving. The devil works in mysterious ways, too." It felt like a punch to the gut. The devil? Was he saying I'd been tricked? That Jesus himself had been some kind of illusion? "I'm just telling you what I saw," I said, my voice steady but my hands trembling. I don't know why he said what he did, but I know it was him. Pastor Daniel sighed, opening his Bible to some verse about false prophets. "Matt, you've been through a traumatic event. Lean on the word, not on fleeting visions. Trust in the church. Trust in the church." The words rang hollow in my ears. As he left, I felt more alone than ever. The church I'd grown up in, the place that was supposed to provide answers, suddenly felt like a closed door. but deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Jesus had spoken to me, and now I had to figure out what it all meant, no matter where it led me. After a few weeks, I was back home, recovering slowly but surely. Sarah was incredible, taking care of everything while I focused on healing. She tried her best to keep things normal, but there was this unspoken tension between us. Every time we prayed before a meal, every time we talked about going back to church, I could feel her holding back, avoiding the subject of what I'd told her in the hospital. But I couldn't avoid it. One night, after Claire had gone to bed, I found myself sitting in the garage, staring at the old Bible my parents had given me when I was a kid. It was dusty, the leather cracked from years of neglect. I hadn't opened it in years, but now I felt this pull, like I needed to find something, though I didn't know what. I opened it at random, letting the pages fall where they wanted. My eyes landed on a passage in Matthew, something about Jesus rebuking the Pharisees. I read the words aloud to myself slowly. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others. The words hit me like a freight train. Was this what he meant? That the church, at least the way I'd experienced it, was like the Pharisees, focused on rules and appearances, but missing the heart of who he was? I kept reading, flipping through the Gospels. Stories I'd heard 100 times growing up suddenly felt alive, like they were speaking directly to me. Jesus wasn't who I'd been taught to see, a distant, judgmental figure watching from afar. He was personal, approachable, full of love for the outcasts and the broken. And then it happened. As I sat there, overwhelmed by the realization that I'd been missing something all my life, the garage filled with a faint glow. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from the street lamp outside. But then I heard it, his voice. Matt. I froze, my heart pounding. Jesus? The light grew brighter, and suddenly, I wasn't in the garage anymore. It was like I'd been transported back to that place, the place of calm where I'd first met him. He stood there, just as I remembered, his eyes filled with a love so deep it made me want to fall to my knees. You seek answers, he said, his voice like a melody, but do not search for me in the traditions of men. They have made my truth into burdens, my grace into rules. I could barely speak, but how do I find you? If the church is wrong, where do I go? He smiled, a soft, knowing smile. I am not found in walls or rituals. I am with you always. In your heart, in the love you show to others, in the truth you seek. Follow me, not the expectations of men. And just like that, he was gone. I blinked, finding myself back in the garage, the Bible still open in my lap. My hands were trembling, my heart racing, but my mind was clear. For the first time, I felt like I understood. Jesus wasn't tied to a building or a denomination. He was bigger than that, closer than that. When I told Sarah about it the next morning, her reaction was cautious. She listened, her hands folded tightly in her lap, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Matt, she said carefully, are you sure this isn't just your mind playing tricks on you? You've been through a lot. I know what I saw, I said, my voice firm but calm. And I know what he told me. He's not in the rituals or the walls. He's here with us, always. She didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she whispered, if that's true, what does that mean for us? For the church, for everything? I didn't have the answers yet. All I knew was that my life was no longer about going through the motions or clinging to traditions. It was about following him, wherever that led. And somehow I knew the journey was only just beginning. As the days passed, the weight of what had happened to me began to sink in. I couldn't go back to pretending I had it all figured out, that everything was fine the way it had always been. What I had experienced, what I had felt, there was no denying it. But as the truth settled in, the people around me, especially Sarah, began to react differently. It wasn't just the doubts anymore, it was the discomfort, the shift that seemed to grow between us like a thickening fog. At first, Sarah did her best to be supportive. She wanted to believe me. She really did. But every time I brought up Jesus' words, every time I spoke of the truth I had felt in that moment, she would become more distant. Her eyes would glaze over, her lips would tighten into a forced smile. You know I love you, Matt, she said one evening, sitting beside me on the couch. But what you're saying, It's a lot to take in. I mean, we've always believed in the church. We've always followed the teachings. Are you saying all of that is wrong now? Her words hit me hard. I never intended to make her question everything, especially not her faith. But how could I deny what I'd seen, what I'd heard? I'm not saying it's all wrong, I replied quietly, but I do think we've been missing something. Jesus isn't just in the church services or in the rituals. He's with us, every day. He's more than a set of rules. He's about love, about grace. I felt that. I know that now. She didn't respond right away. She just stared at the floor, her fingers twisting in her lap. I just don't understand, Matt. I can't just turn everything we've known upside down. What would the kids think? What would our friends think? Her words stung, not because she was wrong, but because I felt the same pressure. The fear of losing everything we'd built, the comfort of the familiar, even if it was just a shadow of the truth. I didn't know what to say to make her understand. She wasn't ready to hear it, and I couldn't push her to see it my way. So I let it go for a while, and we slipped back into the routine. Church on Sundays, dinners with friends, family gatherings. It was all as if nothing had changed. But I could feel the tension growing, like an invisible thread pulling us in opposite directions. Then there was Pastor Daniel. The next time he came to visit, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. He had that look in his eyes, the one that said he had a concerned conversation waiting. Matt, he said, after the usual pleasantries, I've been hearing some things, some troubling things. I've heard that you've been questioning the faith, the teachings of the church. I didn't know how to respond. The last thing I wanted was to go against him. He had been a father figure to me in many ways, guiding me through tough times, supporting my family. But this was different. This wasn't about me rebelling or turning my back on everything I had known. It was about me following something deeper. I'm not questioning the faith, Pastor, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm questioning the way it's been taught to us, the way we've been told to worship, the way we've been told to view Jesus. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. That's dangerous talk, Matt. You've had a close call, I understand that. But the truth has already been revealed to us through the Bible. We don't need to go looking for something new. His words felt like a slap in the face. But Pastor, I'm not looking for something new. I'm just telling you what I felt, what I saw. It's not about the Bible being wrong, it's about the way we've been interpreting it. Pastor Daniel's voice grew firm. Matt, you need to be careful. The devil can deceive even the elect. What you're talking about, visions, near-death experiences, they're not from God. They can lead you astray. It hit me like a cold wave. Was he really telling me that I'd been deceived? That my encounter with Jesus, my real, life-altering experience, was just a trick? I don't believe that, I said, my voice shaking. I felt him, Pastor. I heard him. He's not a trick. He's real, and he's with me. Pastor Daniel stood up, his face hardening. Matt, I'm afraid you're walking a dangerous path. I suggest you come back to church, back to the community. We'll help you through this. But you can't go on like this, questioning everything we've taught you. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue, to convince him, but I could feel the weight of his words, his concern for me, his fear that I was losing my way. And maybe he was right. Maybe I was walking away from everything. But part of me knew this was something I had to do, no matter how hard it was, no matter what the church or my community thought. The tension between Sarah and me deepened over the next few days. She could see I was struggling, but she didn't understand why. Matt, she said one night, her voice trembling, if you keep going down this road, I don't know if I can keep following you. That was the hardest part, the fear that I might lose everything I had built, my family, my faith, my identity, because I'd found a truth that didn't fit into the world I had known. But I couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny what he'd shown me, the love, the grace, the truth, and I knew deep down that I had to follow it, no matter the cost. As I struggled to find my footing, the challenges piled on. It wasn't just about convincing Sarah or Pastor Daniel, it was everything. The simple act of waking up each morning now felt different. The weight of the truth I'd encountered loomed over me like a heavy cloud, but it wasn't just the truth itself that made everything so overwhelming. It was the change that came with it. I could see the cracks beginning to form in the world I had known. The once comfortable routine of church activities, the familiar faces at Bible study, and the reassuring hugs from old friends, they all began to feel hollow. It was as if I were looking at everything through a different lens. One day I ran into Jeff, an old friend from the church. He had always been a steady presence in my life, someone who I admired for his devotion and knowledge of the Bible. But when he saw me that day, standing in the church parking lot, there was something different in his eyes. "Matt," he said, almost cautiously, "I've heard some things about you, about what you're going through. I want you to know I'm here for you, but I'm worried. I don't think this is the right path you're on." The words hit me harder than I expected. Jeff was someone I looked up to, someone who had always steered me in the right direction. "I'm not lost, Jeff," I replied, trying to hold my ground. I'm seeing things differently. I'm trying to understand what I felt." Jeff shook his head, his voice full of concern. "Matt, I've seen people go down this road before. They start questioning things, chasing after experiences, and they end up confused, lost. It's dangerous." I didn't want to argue with him, so I just nodded. "I hear you, but what I felt, what I saw, it's real. I can't just ignore it." As Jeff walked away, I felt a deep pang of isolation. How could I explain this to anyone when they didn't understand what I had encountered? They couldn't see what I had seen, couldn't feel what I had felt. It was like I was speaking a different language. Then there was the growing tension at home. Sarah's fears were becoming more and more apparent. One night, after dinner, she finally broke down. "Matt, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I see you changing, and I don't know where we're going. You're talking about following Jesus in a way I don't understand. It's like you've abandoned everything we've built together, our life, our faith." Her words were a blow to my chest. I knew I wasn't the same person I had been, but the last thing I wanted to do was hurt her. I had to find a way to show her the truth without pushing her away. "I'm not abandoning you, Sarah. I'm just trying to follow what I believe is the right path. I know this is hard for you, but I need you to understand that this isn't about rejecting you or our life. It's about me following what I've been shown." She wiped away a tear. "But what if you're wrong? What if all this spiritual awakening isn't from God? What if it's something else, something dangerous?" Her words made me pause. What if she was right? What if all of this wasn't from God? But deep down, I knew it wasn't a lie. I knew it wasn't a deception. Jesus was real. His love was real. The only question now was whether I could hold on to that truth while everything else seemed to be slipping away. The tension at home was becoming unbearable. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was falling apart. But what if this was part of the process? What if this was a necessary part of my journey? And then there were the whispers in the church. It wasn't just Pastor Daniel and Jeff anymore. Other people were starting to notice. I heard them in hushed voices during coffee hour, whispering behind my back, "Have you heard about Matt? He's lost his way." They didn't know the half of it. They didn't know what I had seen, what I had felt. They didn't understand the depths of my experience. They only saw what they wanted to see, a man questioning everything they had always held dear. But the worst part was when I realized that some of those people, the ones who had once called me a brother, were now avoiding me. They would give me forced smiles in the hallways, but there was no warmth behind their eyes. I was becoming an outsider in my own church, and that stung more than I could put into words. It wasn't just the church or my family, it was the world as I knew it. Everything was shifting. I was changing, and I wasn't sure where it would end. But what kept me going, what kept me from falling apart, was the one truth that had started it all. Jesus was real. He had spoken to me. He had shown me something more. And no matter how hard the road ahead would be, I knew I had to follow it, even if it meant losing everything. The tension at home reached a boiling point that I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't just the silence between Sarah and me, or the disapproving glances from church members. It was the deep emotional struggle I felt inside every single day. I had walked into this journey of faith with so much hope, believing that the truth would set me free. But now it felt like it was tearing me apart. Sarah's anxiety grew, and I could see it on her face, in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. When she did speak to me, her voice trembled. "Matt, I don't even know who you are anymore. You're not the man I married. You're different, distant. I don't know what to do with this." Each word cut through me. I could feel the space between us widening, and yet there was nothing I could do to bridge it. My heart ached to hold her, to make her understand. But the truth, the new truth I had found, was growing within me, and it felt like a wildfire that couldn't be contained. "I'm still here, Sarah," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm still the same man, but I've seen something. I've felt something. I can't just go back to what we were. It's not just about us anymore. It's about who I'm becoming." She took a step back, her eyes wide with confusion and hurt. "Who you're becoming? What is that supposed to mean? What's more important than us, than our family?" "I don't know what it means yet," I admitted, feeling the sting of my own words. "But I know it has to be this way. Jesus is showing me something bigger than I ever realized before. I can't turn away from it." Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. "But why does it have to tear us apart, Matt? Why does it have to be this way? I don't understand." "I don't want this to tear us apart," I said, my voice breaking. "But I can't ignore it. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I don't want to lose our family." But in that moment, I realized something that terrified me. It already felt like I was losing her. It wasn't just the physical distance between us, it was the emotional distance, the disconnect that came with no longer seeing the world the same way. And I didn't know how to make her see it through my eyes. I spent the next few days in turmoil. The weight of my choice felt like a burden I couldn't carry alone. What had started as a deep and spiritual awakening was now a source of division, of isolation. I couldn't help but wonder if the cost was too high, if following the truth meant sacrificing everything I held dear. It was then that I received a phone call from Pastor Daniel, and I could already tell by the tone of his voice that he wasn't calling to check in on me. He was calling with something heavier. "Matt, I've been praying about this, and I think we need to have another talk. I think I can help you through this." I braced myself. I knew what he was going to say. "Pastor, I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about the path I'm on. I know it's not what you think it is, but I can't help what I've experienced." There was a long pause before he spoke. "Matt, I understand you've had a powerful experience, but the path you're on, it's not the path of truth. You've been deceived. You need to come back to the fold. Return to the Word. The Bible is clear, and we don't need anything else to know the truth." His words stung more than I expected. I had heard them before, but now, with everything that had happened, they felt suffocating. "Pastor, I can't just return to what we were. I can't unsee what I've seen, unfeel what I've felt. It's not a choice, it's just the reality I'm living with now." There was a long silence. When he spoke again, it was softer, more like the man I had known. "Matt, I'm worried. I'm worried you're following a path that will lead you into darkness. I care about you. You're not alone in this, even if it feels that way. Let's pray together. I want to help you." His voice, his plea for me to return to the fold, it all felt like a pull back into the familiar, back into the place where I had once found peace. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that peace was only an illusion. The truth had shattered it, and I couldn't go back. Still, I could feel the weight of Pastor Daniel's love for me, and it tore at my heart. He truly believed he was helping me, but what he didn't understand was that he was holding on to a version of Jesus that didn't match what I had encountered. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of my home, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Was this path really what God wanted for me, or had I fallen into some trap that I couldn't see? My head and my heart were in constant turmoil. The struggle between what I knew to be true and the relationships I didn't want to lose was consuming me. And then there was the fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of losing Sarah, fear of losing my place in the community I had called home for so long. But no matter how much I questioned, no matter how much I feared, the truth of that experience still burned in my soul. Jesus wasn't just a figure in a book. He was real, and I had to follow him, no matter the cost. But what would that cost be? And was I ready to face it? The more I tried to grasp the truth of my experience, the more the walls around me seemed to close in. The inner conflict I was battling wasn't just between me and the people I loved. It was also between the growing conviction I felt and the haunting doubt that sometimes crept in when the silence was too loud. Every day felt like I was walking a tightrope, one step away from either falling into deeper faith or being consumed by fear. It was one evening, a few days after the conversation with Pastor Daniel, that something happened that changed everything. I was sitting in my living room, staring at the Bible in my hands, trying to focus on the verses that had always comforted me. But now, every word felt distant. I couldn't help but feel like there was more I was missing. What if my experience, my encounter with Jesus, was something I had misunderstood? What if it wasn't real? As I wrestled with my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was an unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I picked it up. Matt, the voice on the other end was soft, almost trembling. "This is Rachel, from the church. I've been wanting to reach out for a while, but I wasn't sure if it was the right time." "Rachel?" I said, my heart picking up speed. "What's going on?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice strained. "It's about what you've been going through. I've been having dreams. I don't know how to explain it, but I think you need to hear this." My mind raced as I sat up, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Rachel was someone I had known for years, another member of the church who had always been supportive. But her words didn't sound like the Rachel I knew. There was a fear in her voice, a sense of urgency that I hadn't expected. "What kind of dreams?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though a flood of unease started to creep over me. "I can't go into everything right now," she said, her breath catching. "But I think I've seen what you've seen. I've felt what you've felt. I've been hiding it, but it's all been so overwhelming." My pulse quickened. "Rachel, what are you saying? What do you mean?" "I can't explain it over the phone," she whispered, as if someone might be listening. "Meet me tomorrow. There's so much I need to share with you. I know you'll understand. But be careful. You're not the only one being watched." The line went silent, and I was left with a million questions swirling in my head. Who was watching me, and what was Rachel trying to tell me? I had no idea what this meant, but the urgency in her voice told me that whatever was going on was bigger than I had realized. The next day, I met Rachel in a quiet cafe, far from the watchful eyes of the church. She looked different, tired, almost as though she hadn't slept in days. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of fear and desperation, that made my stomach tighten. "I don't know how to say this," she started, looking around nervously. "But I've seen things, in my dreams, in visions. It's like the same thing you've experienced, but I didn't know how to process it. But now, after everything I've seen, I know what you're going through isn't just your own journey. There's something much bigger at play." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What do you mean, bigger?" "Rachel, you have to tell me what you know. I'm losing everything. My faith, my family. I need to understand what's happening." She hesitated, glancing around again as if checking for anyone who might overhear. "It's not just about the church. It's not just about what's in the Bible. There are forces at work here, Matt. There are powers that don't want you to find the truth. They'll do anything to stop you from discovering what's really going on." The words hit me like a shockwave, and I couldn't stop myself from asking the question that had been haunting me for days. "What do you mean, forces? Who's stopping me? What's going on?" Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "There are people in the church, people you trust, who are involved in something that's much darker than we could ever imagine. They know what you've experienced, and they're trying to make sure you don't speak about it. They'll try to silence you, Matt. I don't know who they are, but they're everywhere, watching, listening, and they want to make sure you keep quiet." My mind raced. I didn't know if I should believe her. She sounded scared, and yet, what if she was telling the truth? What if all of this wasn't just in my head? The idea that there were dark forces at work trying to silence me was terrifying, but it also made sense. Why else would Pastor Daniel be so adamant that I return to the fold? Why else would the church members turn their backs on me? "What should I do?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Stay vigilant," Rachel said, her eyes wide with urgency, "and keep your eyes open. The truth is out there, but so are the ones who will stop you from finding it. And whatever you do, Matt, don't trust anyone, no matter how close they seem." Her words lingered in my mind as I left the cafe, a sense of dread gnawing at me. Rachel's warning felt like a prophecy I wasn't prepared to hear, but the reality was that I was already too far down this path to turn back now. And now, with the weight of her words pressing on me, I realized something. My journey was no longer just about rediscovering Jesus. It was about surviving whatever it was that had been unleashed and protecting the truth I had found, no matter what the cost. The walls were closing in, but I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than once, scanning the crowd whenever I went out. Rachel's warning echoed in my mind. Stay vigilant. Don't trust anyone. It was becoming harder to know who I could trust. Sarah, my wife, had grown even more distant, her hurt and confusion turning into frustration. She couldn't understand why I was pulling away from everything we had built. She couldn't see what I saw. "I don't know where this is going, Matt," she said one night, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I want to understand, I really do. But you're not the man I married. You're becoming someone I don't even recognize." Her words were like a dagger, but I couldn't blame her. She wasn't the one who had experienced the divine encounter that had shifted everything for me. She wasn't the one who had seen Jesus in a way that no one else could comprehend. I wanted to explain it to her, but the more I tried, the more I realized how impossible it was. "I'm still the same person, Sarah," I replied, my voice filled with desperation. I can't go back to who I was. What I've seen, what I've felt, it's changed me, and I can't ignore it anymore. I need you to try and see that." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "But I don't understand, and neither do the kids. You're pulling away from everything, Matt, from me, from the life we built, from everything we ever knew." The distance between us felt unbearable, like a vast chasm that I could never cross. Every attempt I made to bridge that gap only seemed to make it wider. And then, in the midst of all this turmoil, I began to notice subtle signs that Rachel's warning wasn't just paranoia. It started with the phone calls, unfamiliar numbers calling, only to hang up when I answered. Strange messages on my voicemail with a voice that sounded muffled and distant. I couldn't be sure, but I had a feeling it was connected to the darker forces Rachel had warned me about. I had no idea who they were, but their presence loomed over me, threatening to expose everything I was fighting for. And then there was my friend, Aaron. He had been one of my closest allies in the church, someone I'd trusted deeply. But even Aaron had started to act differently. Our conversations had grown colder, less meaningful. At first, I brushed it off as nothing more than stress, but then one day he pulled me aside after church and asked me if I was okay. "Matt, you're different. You're pulling away from everyone. And now with all this talk about visions and divine encounters, are you sure you're okay?" He asked, his voice tinged with concern. It was the way he said it, like he was worried about me, but also like he was testing me. The tone of his voice, the hesitation in his words made my stomach churn. Something wasn't right. I wanted to confide in him, to tell him about what I'd seen, what I'd experienced, but there was an unease in my gut telling me not to. "I'm fine, Aaron," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I've just been going through some things, trying to find answers." He nodded slowly, but his eyes were filled with doubt. "You know, Matt, sometimes it's better to let go of things that don't fit into our lives. We've got to trust the church, trust the process." I paused, a cold shiver running down my spine. The way he spoke about trust felt like a warning, like he was trying to steer me back to the fold, back to the comfort of the familiar. It was subtle, but it was there. I couldn't shake the feeling that Aaron was trying to manipulate me, to push me back into the place I had been before everything had changed. "I'm just looking for the truth, Aaron," I replied, my voice soft but firm. "And I can't ignore what I've experienced. I can't go back to how things were." He didn't answer. Instead, he simply turned and walked away, his back stiff with the weight of unspoken words. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Aaron and what he had said. It was as if he had become a puppet, controlled by something or someone else. The more I thought about it, the more it all made sense. Aaron was just one of many, people I had once trusted, now becoming pawns in a much bigger game. And then there was Rachel, still on the fringes, trying to warn me about the dangers that surrounded us. Her phone call had left me unsettled, but I knew she wasn't lying. The way she spoke, the fear in her voice, it was real. There was something happening, something far beyond my understanding, and I was caught in the middle of it. I had to make a choice. Could I keep pushing forward, trusting in the truth I had found, even if it meant losing everyone around me? Could I risk everything, the relationships, the life I had built, just to follow the path I knew was right? Or was Rachel's warning a sign that I was in over my head? The tension was mounting. The people around me, my family, my friends, even the church, were all becoming strangers, and the journey I had embarked upon felt increasingly like a battle for survival. The more I uncovered, the more the truth seemed to slip further away from my grasp. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I could not back down. Not now. Not when I had come so far. The price of the truth was steep, but I was willing to pay it, no matter the cost. But in the back of my mind, the question lingered. What was I truly up against? The pressure had been building for weeks. It was as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath my feet with each passing day. The doubts, the whispers, the warnings, they were all starting to converge, pulling me in different directions. But one truth remained unshakable in my heart. I couldn't turn back now. There was too much at stake. I hadn't seen Rachel in days, and I was growing more and more worried about her. Her cryptic warnings and her fear had left me with a sense of urgency, as though something was coming, something big. And then, one afternoon, I received a call that made my heart stop. It was from Sarah. "Matt," she said, her voice shaky, "something's wrong. I think someone's been in the house." My pulse raced. "What do you mean, someone's been in the house?" "I don't know. I came home from picking up the kids, and I found the front door unlocked. The kitchen was a mess, like someone had been looking through our things. I'm scared, Matt. I don't know who would do this, but it feels wrong." I could hear the panic in her voice, and it made my stomach tighten. I told her I'd come home immediately, but as soon as I hung up, I felt the weight of something else pressing down on me. The sense of being watched, of being pursued. It was more real now than ever. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been in our home had been looking for something, and I was beginning to suspect it was me. When I arrived, the sight of the door wide open, the house in disarray, made my heart sink. But it wasn't just the mess that unsettled me. It was the presence I could feel lingering in the air. Something had changed. The walls of my own home felt like they were closing in, as if they were keeping secrets that weren't meant to be discovered. I searched the house, checking every room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something was wrong. Sarah and the kids were shaken, but they were unharmed. I tried to calm them down, assuring them that it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. Something was happening, something bigger than I could understand. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, my thoughts kept returning to Rachel. Where was she? Why hadn't she reached out again? The silence was deafening, and then, just as I was about to drift off, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me tonight. The truth is closer than you think." My heart raced as I read the message. There was no name, no explanation, just the cryptic message. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, told Sarah I was going out for a bit, and left without another word. I drove to the place Rachel had mentioned in our last conversation, a quiet park on the edge of town, far from anyone who might be watching. When I arrived, I found her sitting on a bench, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Rachel," I said, my voice filled with concern. "What's going on? Why haven't you reached out to me?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and sorrow. Then, with a shaky breath, she spoke. "Matt, they know. They know everything. The church, the people in charge, they've been watching us. They've been watching you, and they won't stop until you turn away from the truth." I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean? Who are they? Why are they doing this?" She shook her head, her hands trembling. "It's not just about you, Matt. It's about all of us. There's something they're hiding, something they've been hiding for centuries, and they'll do anything to keep it buried. You've seen it, haven't you? The visions, the truth." I nodded, my mind racing. Yes, I've seen Jesus. I know what I saw. But this is bigger than I ever imagined. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Rachel stood up, pacing as she spoke. Because I was scared. I didn't want to believe it. But now I know. It's real. The people in the church who seem so trustworthy, who teach us every Sunday, there are forces within the institution that are keeping us in the dark. They're afraid of the truth you're getting close to. I felt a lump form in my throat. What truth? She stopped pacing and looked directly at me. That Jesus didn't come just to save us from sin. He came to show us the way to something more, something deeper. The church has twisted his message for centuries, but you've touched the heart of it, and that's why they're afraid of you. That's why they're watching you. Her words felt like a weight crashing down on me. I was no longer just dealing with my own spiritual crisis. I was caught in the middle of a war for the truth. And if what Rachel was saying was true, I was standing on the front lines. I don't know what to do, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They're all against me. My family, my friends, the church, they're all pushing me to conform, to turn back. But I can't. I know what I've seen, and I know it's real. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes intense. You can't give up now, Matt. You can't go back to what you were before. If you do, they win. They silence the truth. But the truth was so much heavier than I had ever imagined. With every step I took, I felt like I was walking deeper into a storm, one that had the power to destroy everything I had known. I had to decide, would I risk everything, the people I loved, my faith, my very life, just to follow the truth that had been revealed to me? Could I keep moving forward in the face of such overwhelming opposition? As Rachel's words echoed in my mind, I realized there was no turning back. The truth was out there, but the forces that sought to destroy it would stop at nothing to bury it. I had to find the courage to face them, to stand firm in the light of the truth, no matter the cost. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. The path ahead was unclear, but I had no choice but to walk it. The real battle had only just begun. The days following my meeting with Rachel were a blur. Tension hung thick in the air like a storm cloud just waiting to burst. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The truth I had uncovered was no longer something I could keep hidden inside. It was becoming a force that was pushing its way into every part of my life, and I couldn't control it. I found myself torn between two worlds. One, the world of my family, my friends, and the church I had spent so many years serving. The other, a world of raw, undeniable truth. A truth that had come to me not in the form of a sermon or a doctrine, but through an encounter so profound, so life-altering, that I could never turn my back on it. One evening, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was strained, as though she had been holding back tears for hours. Matt, I need to talk to you. I don't know what to do anymore. Everything is falling apart. The kids are scared. I'm scared. You've changed. I don't know who you are anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, my heart twisted with guilt. I had been so consumed with the truth, so focused on my own spiritual journey, that I hadn't even noticed how much I was losing in the process. Sarah's pain was my fault, but how could I explain to her what was happening? How could I make her see what I had experienced when no one else could? I know I've changed, I said, my voice filled with emotion. But I'm still here. I'm still your husband, Sarah. I'm still the same man who loves you. But as I said the words, I knew they weren't enough. I had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. I want to believe you, Matt, she replied, her voice breaking. But you're not the same person. I don't know how much more of this I can take. We can't keep living like this. The line went quiet, the silence more deafening than anything she could have said. I knew she was right. Our lives were unraveling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The pain of watching Sarah suffer, of knowing that I was the cause of her turmoil, cut deeper than I could have imagined. But at the same time, a part of me knew that if I gave up now, if I turned away from the truth, it would destroy me. I couldn't live a lie. Later that night, I sat alone in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. I had become a stranger to my own family. The church had turned its back on me, and I was losing the only people who had ever truly mattered to me. The question that had been haunting me for weeks now seemed clearer than ever. What was I willing to sacrifice for the truth? The answer came to me with the suddenness of a revelation. Everything. I had to choose between the truth that had been revealed to me and the life I had built. There was no middle ground, no easy way out. I couldn't continue living a double life. I couldn't pretend to be someone I wasn't, to follow a doctrine I knew was twisted. The church had built its foundation on lies, and the more I discovered, the more I realized that everything I had known, everything I had believed, was being tested. The next day, I went to see Father Michael, the man who had been my spiritual mentor for years. He was a kind, gentle man, someone I had trusted with my deepest fears and doubts. But today something felt different. When I walked into his office, he was sitting at his desk, his eyes narrowing as he looked up at me. There was no warmth in his gaze, no sense of welcome, just coldness, as if he had been waiting for me. "Matt, I've been expecting you," he said, his voice low and even. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't told anyone about the truth I had uncovered, but somehow Father Michael knew. It was as if the walls were closing in on me, and I was trapped. "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "What is the church hiding? Why are we being kept in the dark?" Father Michael stood up, his expression unreadable. "Matt, I've warned you. You're going down a dangerous path. There are things about the faith that you don't understand, things you're not ready to hear." I felt a rush of frustration. "No, I've seen it. I've felt it. I know what's real. I can't ignore it anymore. You can't keep deceiving us." For a moment, there was silence. Father Michael didn't speak. He just stood there, his eyes cold and calculating. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black book. He placed it on the table in front of me, and for the first time, I felt a chill run through my body. "This is not just about belief, Matt," he said, his voice hardening. "This is about control. The truth you think you've uncovered is dangerous. It's not meant for people like you." I looked at the book, feeling a shiver run down my spine. "What is this? What are you trying to say?" Father Michael's eyes bored into mine. "You've crossed a line, Matt, and now there are consequences. If you continue down this path, there will be no turning back. Your life, everything you know, will be destroyed." The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the room closing in around me, the air growing thick with tension. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading. The moment of truth. I had to decide if I was going to walk away from everything I had ever known, my faith, my family, my identity, or if I was going to stand firm and face the storm head on. With one final look at Father Michael, I stood up, my decision made. "I'm not backing down," I said, my voice steady. "I'm going to find the truth, no matter what it costs." As I turned and walked out of his office, I knew that there was no going back. The battle was only beginning. I felt the weight of every step I took, each one pulling me deeper into a reality I wasn't ready to face but couldn't escape. The storm was no longer a distant rumble. It was here. It had been here all along, quietly waiting for me to take that final leap. And now that I had, there was no turning back. The truth was like a fire in my chest, burning, relentless, consuming everything in its path. I could feel the very foundation of my life cracking beneath me, the walls of the life I'd built with Sarah and the kids crumbling one by one. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that everything I had once believed was a lie. The church, my faith, the world I thought I knew, they had all been built on falsehoods, and I was starting to see it for the first time. But it wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about my personal crisis or my struggles to make sense of everything that had happened. It was about everyone who had ever been deceived. It was about the millions of people who had lived their entire lives in the shadow of a lie. And it was about the truth that had been hidden for so long, a truth that had the power to change everything. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't ignore it. Not now. But the deeper I went, the more dangerous the game became. Every door I opened revealed more secrets, more lies. Every person I spoke to, every book I read, only pushed me further into the unknown. And soon, it became clear that something, was trying to stop me. They weren't just watching anymore. They were hunting me. I had already seen signs of their attempts to silence me. My phone had been tapped. My emails were being monitored. Strange cars had followed me through the city. But it wasn't until that night, when I came home to find Sarah gone, that I realized just how far they would go to stop me. The house was empty. The door was unlocked, just like before. I felt a cold dread wash over me as I stepped inside. It was too quiet, too still. My heart raced in my chest as I checked the rooms, calling out Sarah's name, my voice echoing through the silence. But there was no answer. I rushed through the house, panic creeping up my spine. My worst fear had come true. Sarah was gone. And the only thing I could think of was that they had taken her to get to me. I grabbed my phone, dialing Rachel's number with shaking hands. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. I was on my own. I had to act. I couldn't wait for Rachel or anyone else. This was my fight now. I knew that the only way to find Sarah, to bring her back, was to confront those who were behind all of this. The ones who had orchestrated this web of lies, the ones who had used fear and manipulation to control everything I had ever believed. I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait. I wasn't going to play their game. I was going to find the truth, even if it cost me everything. I spent the next few hours tracking down every lead I could find. It felt like I was running in circles. Every step I took seemed to bring me no closer to the truth. But then, finally, I got a break. I found a small, hidden address, one that wasn't listed in any directory, a place that seemed almost too off the grid to be real. Without thinking, I jumped in my car and headed to the address. Every second felt like an eternity as I drove, my mind racing. What was waiting for me there? Who would I find? And most importantly, would I be able to save Sarah before it was too late? When I arrived, I could feel the oppressive weight of fear pressing in on me. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few days. There were no signs of life, no movement. But I knew I was close. I could feel it in my bones. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The air around me was thick with anticipation, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment where everything changed, where the truth would either set me free or destroy me. I pushed the door open. Inside, I found Sarah, sitting alone in a dimly lit room, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up at me with a mixture of relief and fear. She had been waiting for me. "They took me, Matt," she whispered. "They've been watching us. They know what you found." My heart sank. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen, but I'm going to fix this. I swear I'm going to fix everything." But as I stood there holding her, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for her. I wasn't just fighting for my family. I was fighting for something much bigger, something that could change the course of history itself. The truth I had uncovered was not just about me or about Sarah. It was about the very foundations of the faith I had once trusted. And now I had to decide, would I risk everything to bring that truth into the light, no matter the consequences? Would I be willing to face the ultimate cost of exposing the lies that had been hidden for so long? With Sarah by my side, I knew there was no turning back. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about redemption, about reclaiming what had been stolen, not just from me, but from everyone who had ever been deceived. As I looked at Sarah, I knew one thing for sure. The storm had come, and we were going to face it together. The night felt thick with tension, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. I stood in the darkened room with Sarah, my hands gripping hers, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth I had uncovered, the truth I had been fighting for, was now so close I could almost taste it. But I knew that getting to it meant going through the darkest storm of my life. It wasn't just about exposing lies anymore. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming everything I had lost, and potentially losing everything I still had left. "We're not backing down, Matt," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling but determined. "No matter what happens, we face this together." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I had never felt more certain of anything in my life. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't pretend that this wasn't happening. Everything I had once believed had been shattered, and now there was nothing left but the truth, and the price I had to pay to uncover it. We had been followed, we had been watched, but nothing would prepare us for the moment we walked into that hidden room, into the heart of everything. The room was cold, empty, and unassuming, but the man standing in the center, waiting for us, made my blood run cold. Father Michael. He was no longer the mentor I had once admired. His face was hard, his eyes cold and calculating. The man I had known was gone, replaced by someone or something that seemed to embody everything I had come to fear. "Matt," he said, his voice chilling, almost mournful. "You don't understand. You never understood. This is bigger than you, bigger than any of us. You're playing with fire and now you're going to burn." "I'm done being afraid," I said, my voice low but firm. "You've been hiding the truth for too long. You've used God's name to control people, to manipulate them. I can't let that continue." Father Michael stepped closer, his gaze hardening. "You think you've uncovered the truth? You've barely scratched the surface. You've opened doors you weren't meant to open. And now you've put yourself and everyone you love in danger." The words stung, but I held my ground. I'd rather face the danger than live in the lie. Sarah squeezed my hand, her strength grounding me. She had seen the transformation in me, the struggle between who I had been and who I was becoming. And now we were both standing on the precipice, ready to take that final step into the unknown. Father Michael's eyes flickered with something that might have been regret, but it vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold resolve. "If you insist on going down this path, then you leave me no choice. You must understand, Matt, this isn't just about faith. It's about power, and power must be protected." Before I could respond, the room seemed to shift. A cold wind whipped through the air, and I felt a presence, a dark, oppressive presence, settle over us. I knew what it was. I had felt it before, during the moments of clarity, during the revelations. This wasn't just about the church. This was about something far greater, something evil. Suddenly, the ground beneath us seemed to tremble, and Father Michael's face twisted, as if contorted by forces I couldn't comprehend. His voice rose, a chant, one that felt ancient, like it was rooted in something far darker than I had ever imagined. I felt Sarah pull away from me, her eyes wide with fear. "Matt, we need to leave. This isn't just a man. He's something else." But it was too late. Father Michael's body convulsed, his eyes rolling back into his head, and the room seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. I could feel the air thickening, the weight of something ancient pressing down on me. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it was no longer just about me. This wasn't just a battle for the truth. It was a battle for our souls. I stepped forward, my voice steady but filled with conviction. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave." For a moment there was silence. The room felt suffocating, the darkness closing in. Then, with a final guttural scream, Father Michael collapsed to the floor, his body still, and in that moment, everything went quiet. I could feel the presence lifting, the heavy air dissipating, and as I looked at Father Michael's motionless body, I realized something profound. The lies had been more than just false teachings. They had been a weapon used to control, to manipulate, to keep us from seeing the truth. I turned to Sarah, my heart racing. She looked at me with wide eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Matt, what just happened? Was that real?" "It was real," I said, my voice hoarse. "We've uncovered the truth, Sarah, but the fight isn't over. There's so much more to uncover." And as I looked at her, I felt the weight of everything we had just faced. The truth had come at a great cost, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. We had faced the darkness, and we had won. But the journey was far from over. I didn't know where it would take us or what we would have to sacrifice, but I knew one thing. We would continue to seek the truth, and we would never stop fighting. As I stood there, looking at the quiet aftermath of the battle we had just fought, the truth that had once seemed so elusive was now undeniable. The room was still, almost peaceful, but the weight of everything that had happened pressed on me like an immovable force. The truth I had uncovered, this life-altering revelation about the lies I had once believed, had turned my entire world upside down. But in the chaos, I realized something. I was no longer afraid. What had started as an internal struggle had now become a journey for redemption. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had been deceived by the lies that had been fed to us for so long. I had once been a man consumed by fear and doubt, but now I was free. Sarah and I stood there in the quiet, the tension between us still palpable, yet somehow lighter than before. She had witnessed everything, the transformation of my faith, the struggle, the pain, and the ultimate breakthrough. She had seen the truth break through the darkness, and she stood beside me, resolute and stronger than ever. I realized, as I looked at her, that this was no longer just about exposing lies or fighting against those who sought to manipulate the truth. It was about embracing the freedom that comes with knowing the real Jesus, the one whose love had no bounds, whose grace had no end, the one who had always been there, even when I had turned away, even when I had been blind to the truth. We had uncovered the layers of deception, but more than that, we had found peace in the truth. The battle for our souls was far from over, but it had reached a critical turning point. We had chosen to stand on the side of light, even when the darkness had seemed overwhelming. "Matt, do you think this is it? Is it over now?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice still filled with wonder and disbelief. I shook my head, a small smile creeping across my face. "No, Sarah. It's just beginning. The truth is too powerful, too life-changing to stop here. But what I know now is that we're not alone in this. We never were. The truth had set us free, but now we had to share it. Not just with the world, but with everyone who had been deceived, misled, or lost in the same lies I had once believed. We were walking a new path, one that was paved with grace, forgiveness, and the unshakable love of Jesus Christ. And as I stood there, I knew that our lives had been changed forever. But there was still so much left to do. There were still so many people who needed to hear the truth, to know that redemption was possible, and I was ready to fight for it. As I looked out into the horizon, I felt a sense of purpose flood through me. We had found the truth, but now it was time to live it. It was time to walk in the freedom we had been given and share that freedom with others. So, as we stood there in the stillness of the night, Sarah and I made a promise, to each other and to ourselves, that we would continue this journey no matter where it took us. We would face the challenges, the heartaches, and the battles ahead, knowing that the truth was with us, and nothing could take that away. What about you? Have you ever felt the weight of a lie in your life? Have you ever questioned what you've been taught or believed? The journey to truth may not be easy, but it's a journey worth taking. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own spiritual journey. What truths have you uncovered? What lies have you come to recognize? We invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of redemption, awakening, and the power of truth. Remember, you are not alone. The journey might be tough, but there is always hope, always grace, and always the opportunity for transformation. Stay with us as we continue to explore the profound impact of truth and faith in the next episode. Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep walking in the light.